everyone, I'm Nico from Licks of the Beast, and in this video I'm going to show you how to play the very cool Die With Your Boots On by Iron Maiden. This is a song from the wonderful Peace of Mind album that I think might be a little underappreciated. Perhaps it's because it's on an album with such massive songs as Where Eagles There, The Trooper, Revelations, and Flight of Icarus. But either way, this is a great song with catchy melodies, awesome riffs and harmonies, and of course, two killer solos by Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. It's also a great song for advanced beginners and early intermediate players to tackle, because it's very approachable from a technique standpoint, but it also requires you to work on key elements of your playing. Things like timing, alternating between chords and single notes, palm muting, and subtleties like those little micro rests that are so important to Iron Maiden's guitar parts. As I like to do with all my tutorials, I'll try to make this interesting and informative for anyone who might not necessarily play guitar or any instrument at all, but has an interest in how the main guitar parts of Iron Maiden songs are played and arranged. So with that in mind, let's get to how to play Die With Your Boots On. The intro riff is something that could be confusing for those who are not yet very familiar with the way Iron Maiden typically structures their guitar harmonies. And this is because the overall sound is a bit different from how the two guitar parts sound individually. Now, Dave and Adrian are each playing the same simple three-note pattern a third apart. As is often the case, Adrian takes the lower melody and Dave takes the higher melody. So here is Adrian's part. And here it is slowly. Dave's part goes like this. And again, slowly. There are two important details here. One is the palm muted low E used as a pedal point. You're going to want to make sure you're not using heavy palm muting on this one as you would, for example, with a thrash riff. It's actually a very slight palm mute, and the feel is kept loose but tight, which is what gives it that particular bounce. So you might have to play with this a little bit to get it to sound exactly right. But don't overthink it. Just focus on accenting the E and G notes on the 7th fret of the A string. The second thing is the vibrato. Now I know everyone wants to try to mimic Adrian's wide and super tasty vibrato, but be careful not to overdo it on parts like this one. Because this is a dual guitar harmony, you'll want to make sure that you're not bending the notes out of tune, or it will not sound good with the rest of the band. Just add enough to give it some life so that it isn't dull. The verse section is about as simple as it gets, with just 3 chords: E, G, C, and then G again. 2 details here as well. Number 1, the chord changes don't come on the downbeat of 1. They're anticipated by a half beat so that they change on the preceding upbeat, the AND of 3. That gives the song a sense of forward momentum, and this is something Iron Maiden do quite often, so you'll want to get used to playing this kind of anticipated rhythm. Number 2, the G chord they play is a bit different from the usual power chord. It's a bit more of a Jimi Hendrix version of a power chord, as they use the thumb to play the root, the index plays the D on the second string, and the middle and ring fingers are on the 5th and 4th strings respectively. This lets the open G string ring out so that the G note is doubled. And the chord sounds a little brighter, fuller, and more open. This is another thing they do quite often, so it's worth learning it. But if you're having a hard time with it, you can always play a regular G power chord until you get the hang of this other version. Now the pre-chorus, which is made up of 2 parts. The bouncy staccato part, and then the chugging part that leads into the chorus. Musically, this part is really interesting because there's a change in feel, and that is highlighted by a change in key as well. They're moving from E minor to B flat major, which isn't something rock bands do very often, but Maiden pulled it off smoothly so that it sounds very good and surprisingly natural. So the first half goes like this. And here it is slowly. So you play that twice and then move on to the chugging part, which goes like this. And here's that part slowly. The chorus features some really cool interplay between the 2 guitars and the bass. The bass is holding down the root note E, and the guitars are playing a pattern that highlights the chords. But the way they play the chords is slightly different. Adrian sticks to dyads and plays it a little more rhythmically, like this. So here it is slowly. Dave plays it more straightforward and a bit closer to the bass line with more use of the open E string. And again, slowly. Next is Dave's solo. And of course, we're focusing on the rhythm parts, so let's look at what Adrian is playing underneath. It's about as simple as it gets. We're ascending diatonically in the key of A minor, from the first chord to the 4th. So it's going to be A, G over B, C, and D. And like the verse, this is a syncopated rhythm, so the changes happen on the upbeat of 3. And that's played 4 times. That takes us to the really cool interlude section. Now here they play a melody that is harmonized with much wider intervals than usual. Typically they use thirds or sixths, but here they're harmonizing it in 11ths and 12ths. This gives the part a really broad sound, a bit like a movie score. Dave's part can be heard more prominently, and it goes like this. So let's look at that just a little slower. goes something like this. And here it is slowly. Once the vocals come in, Dave changes to a simple power chord pattern that supports the vocal melody and allows Bruce's voice to come through. So he's just playing A, F, G, and A again, like this. Meanwhile, Adrian continues playing the same low melody, changing the ending both times. Now the first time he ends it like this. And the second time around he just stays on the A chord with a percussive rhythm that they all play together, leading into Adrian's solo, like this. During Adrian's solo, Dave plays this chord progression here. A, F, B, then ascending A, G over B, C, and D. So it looks like this. We do this twice, and then that last D leads nicely back into the pre-chorus. From there, it's pre-chorus, chorus, and then we end with this bluesy tail. And that's it. I hope this was easy enough to follow along and that it also provided some interesting insights into this great song by Iron Maiden. Let me know your thoughts and questions in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, and of course, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. All of these things are extremely helpful in supporting the work I'm doing here, and it's all very much appreciated. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.